Okay, so this is going to be a postlab, help you do the calculations on this popcorn counting units lab. So what this is doing is this is modeling how we mass atoms and molecules. Because they're so small, we're using popcorn kernels instead to count them and to weigh them in amounts, kind of like what you're gonna find out we do with atoms. Okay, so if you're using the class data slideshow that I posted, you would have 34 kernels here. I'm going to do the calculations with something else that is kind of ridiculous. So you would not be using my number for your calculations. But whatever you did in terms of massing, how many things would equal 5 kernels, like I said, if you're using my data, it's 34. So this is called one popcorn counting unit. Okay, and so these are a lot of conversion factors. Remember, we did unit dimensional analysis back in unit 2, I think it is, maybe even unit 1. So we're going to do some of that here in this. So it says, how would you calculate the number of kernels in 3 popcorn counting units? So this is going to become my conversion factor for a lot of things. So I would have 1 popcorn counting unit equals 75 kernels. This would be my conversion factor. And so I would be going multiplying 3 times 75, which equals 225 kernels. And I wouldn't worry too much about sig figs. This has got 1 sig fig, but I wouldn't round it down to 1. You might, round it to 2, and in that case, this would be 230 kernels. But as long as it's not crazy and you're not showing me like your whole calculator display, it should be fine. Okay, show how you would calculate the number of kernels in 20 grams. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a 2-step unit conversion because I have grams here, so I'm going to cancel grams by putting grams here. And then I'm going to go to popcorn counting units. So this is going to be a 1. You'll notice in all the conversion factors, the popcorn unit counting unit is a 1. Not in the givens or the answers, but in the conversion factors. And so I know that this is 5 grams. And since it wants the number of kernels, I'm also going to do another conversion factor where I'm going to use my standard 75 kernels. Now, when you do something like this, I think it's much more effective and comes out much more correct when you multiply everything on the top. So 20 times 1 times 75 and hit equals. I don't actually put the 1 in because I know it's the same thing. So I go 20 times 75. Then I hit equals, so it says 1500 on my calculator. And then I'm going to divide it by whatever's on the bottom. And again, this is a 1, so I don't care about that. I'm dividing it by 5. So I'm getting 300. And since this has 3 sig figs, these guys have 2. We usually go with the original number in the front. So I'm going to make it have 300 kernels. Okay, so we're going to be doing a lot of these conversions back and forth using this idea of how much a certain package weighs. Okay, so how would we calculate the mass in grams of 100 popcorn kernels? So 100 kernels. And then I'm going to be using, I have 75 kernels in 1 popcorn counting unit. 1 popcorn counting unit weighs 5 grams. So very, very similar to the last one I did, but instead I'm finding the mass instead of finding how many I have. So I'm going to go 100 times 5, obviously it's 500, divided by 75, and I'm going to get 6.67 grams would be my answer. Okay, so now you're going to do that down here in this table, but you don't need to write all the steps down, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be, depending upon what it gives you, if I have popcorn counting units, I'm going to be timesing it by the 75 I have. Oops, wrong way. No, that is not what I want to do. I am going to times it by 75 to count how many I have, the number of popcorn kernels. So 2 times 75 is 150. I know that one would be 150 times 10, but 750 times 500. I would do that in my calculator. Over here, since one popcorn kernel weighs 5 grams, I believe you guys are going to do the same thing. You're going to multiply this times the 5 grams. So this is going to be 10 grams. This is going to be 100 grams. 2,500 times 5. 2,500 grams. Okay. Now, when we get to these, we really need to go here first. So opposite of what we did here. We're dividing by 5 to get the number of PCU. So this, and it kind of makes sense because there's 10 up here, so this is going to be a 2. And then to go this way, we're still timesing by 75, so this would still be 150 in my data. And then when you get down here, in order to go backwards to the number of PCUs, you're going to divide by however many. And like I said, if you're using my sample data in the slideshow, that would be 34. But mine comes out to be 0.0133. And then to get mass of the kernels, again, you're going in this direction, so you're going to times this by 5. And this comes out to 0.067. Okay, so that should give you a chance. I would pause this right now so you get a chance to fill in your data with yours. You guys are still going to be using the 5 because that's the standard. But in terms of going to the number of kernels, you're not using the 75. You're using whatever your number of kernels came out to be. And like I said, if you're using the data from the slideshow, that's a 34. Okay, so this is really what we do. We use the periodic table as a counting measure. And if I looked up the unopened bag that I have in the slideshow, you would see that mine says 850 grams. So I didn't put it on the balance because I don't think that little balance would weigh it. But most of our food products now in their packages, they show us how many, the mass of it, okay? So now this says use the mass of the popcorn bag and your PCO to determine how many kernels are in a bag. When I was doing this, I was thinking of like those things that you go to like parties or whatever when we had parties right before COVID, and they have like the big jar of M&Ms, and that's different. It's not a bag of M&Ms, but like if we could do this, you could weigh it, you could do this calculation, you'd be like a shoo-in for the winner. So I would take this 850 grams. 5 grams is 1 PCU. And for me, I have 75 kernels in 1 PCU. One thing I also remember when I do this kind of stuff is when I was in college, I worked at Disneyland and I worked in the bank, if you can imagine how much money, and this was before debit cards. So I worked in the bank and we counted money, but we only counted money if it didn't weigh right. So we used to take bundles of 20s and bundles of 10s and put them on a balance, and the balance knows how much they're supposed to mass. And if they didn't mass that, then we had to open them up and count them. But if the mass was right, we were like, okay, that's a bundle of what it's supposed to be. All right. Okay, so then you can answer this question. They often talk about a dozen things, because a dozen is similar to a PCU. It's a quantity, 12 things always. And what we're getting to is how we measure atoms. Okay, so now this thing is like, if we had, for my example, and this should be true for anyone you have a quantity. Like I said, if you were using the sample data, it would be 34. For mine that I'm using 75. So these questions are like, if you had 1 PCU of marbles, how many would it be? 1 PCU of any of my samples that I'm using. Okay, and the answer is going to be the same thing over and over and over. You would use minus 75, yours would be 34. Okay, so then it goes into these different kinds of things. Now I have more than these in the sample data. I actually did Cheerios and toothpicks, so it's personal, whatever you prefer to use. Anything that's small enough. I just wanted to, I was on a roll, so I started doing that. So this is kind of similar to this one here. The number of particles in one PCU is going to be 75 all the way down. This is all going to be the same. And it's not going to be the same mass though, because these guys are all different sizes. So what I have here you have to look in the slideshow and look at the data and record the data here. And then, for example, I'm going to do the first one. So let's say it was 75, and let's say when I watch the slideshow, the Google slideshow, you can read it on the balance, it says 12.2. So to get the average, what you're going to do is you're going to take the mass and you're going to divide it by the number of things you have there. So I have 12.2 and I'm dividing it by 75. So I would get 0.162. I think 2 decimal places is probably, I can put 2. It's a 3 grams. So that's how you're going to fill out this table, is you're going to be taking these masses. Either you massed them or you're getting them off the Google slideshow and you dividing them to get the average, which is supposed to be modeling how the average molar masses are on the table, the AMU masses. Okay, so then we get to this idea. This is similar to when I was showing you guys how to add up the molecular mass of things. This is saying you have something with 2 marshmallows, 3 split peas, and like 10 black beans. If I just used M for marshmallows, P for peas, and B for beans or black beans, like this is what it would look like formula-wise. So what would I do is I'm going to take the 2 times whatever this marshmallow mass is, the average, so I'm just going to put a star right here, plus 3 times my pinto bean one. I actually have it, it's 0.162. But if you were doing it, let's say this is a triangle, you would use your triangle mass there. Plus 10, my black beans, I'm going to put a circle there. Well, maybe not a circle. It's going to be confused with something else. How about a heart? 10 black beans. So this is what we were doing with the molar masses, the AMU masses, was we were adding 2 of those plus 3 of those plus 10 of those. Basically, we're adding them all up. And whatever you get here is your mass. Okay, and so then there's a couple other questions like which one's greater, which one's less. And then down here on the bottom, the very last question asks you to convert some container, one of the packages, to how many things. So it's not going to be popcorn, because popcorn was done, we did it popcorn on this one right here, was 850. But it's going to be exactly the same type of calculation as this. It's just whatever the container is, whatever its mass is from this part right here, and then your PCU unit, mine's 75, yours would be 34, is how you're going to do this calculation. It would look very, very similar to this guy right here, but you're using the data that is in the back with the different items. Okay, so hopefully that helps. You are doing a lot of calculations. It's very unit dimensional analysis focused, because this unit is a lot of calculations. All right, that's a wrap.